Well, Finaeo origin story starts back in 2016, and actually the name goes way before that.
I'm gonna come back to superpowers. So just a warning, okay? Because you talked
Okay,
about being a hero.
I think a couple of things like get really familiar with what venture capital is from an asset class. We really believe that humans need to stay at the center. We believe that people need to be empowered with great technology. We feel like the industry has a long way to go to solve that problem themselves, and we hope to be a catalyst to that solution.
Hey folks, I'm sitting down today with Aly Dhalla, co-founder and CEO of Finaeo. Finaeo is a great Canadian startup. Aly is from the industry, good Canadian guy. Came in as an advisor originally, saw an opportunity, and was courageous enough to start Finaeo, where they're creating an ecosystem for advisors and using tech to enable advisors in the modern era and help advance the industry forward. This is one of the few tech company founders you'll sit down and talk to and hear him talk about the importance of being a human first company and his passion for the industry. I'll let you listen to the interview. This will be an interesting one, and I'm sure we're going to be doing many follow-up conversations. Enjoy. So Aly, welcome. Good to see you today. So
Good to be here.
Yeah. We've been talking about sitting down for a while and finally found the time. So I'm excited to get into some stuff today. Just kind of as a formal introduction, I have Aly Dhalla with me. He's the CEO and co-founder of Finaeo. So first thing that comes to mind when I say Finaeo, I'm like, what is that? What's a Finaeo? Can you start there?
My career, 2008, 2009.
Yeah.
I'm a financial advisor, helping families through, the crisis back then, working at a retail bank at TD. And back then, you kind of had a few stock answers to questions that clients had. It was no, policy, can't do it, I'm sorry. So those are the kind of four stock answers you had at retail. And kind of this whole concept of you never got to really be a hero to your clients because you're trapped with all these chains of corporate. So Finaeo is kind of a short form for financial advisor hero. And that's what it really started at. It was about how to help financial professionals create heroic moments for their clients. And it also then became kind of an internal moniker. So it stands for, as kind of corny as it sounds, failure is not an entrepreneurial option. And it's kind of like, no matter what happens, we're going to go make this work. We're going to put our heart and soul into the problem. And so, yeah, two sides to the meaning. And the color purple, there's a story behind the purple as well. So we were kind of thinking about how to brand the company. And purple came to be an interesting color because it's a color of royalty from back in the day. So, a lot of people used to wear purple robes. It's an LGBT color. So it's a very inclusive color. It's supposed to make you feel very calm when you look at it. The shade of purple we picked was very specific. And then lastly, it's supposed to also be a really smart color in terms of artificial intelligence. So being the third eye in the chakra is a purple color. So some things that we thought about when we started the business.
That I love that background story, and it explains a lot because whenever I look at your logo, I feel smarter. Like I just kind of like, it just, the IQ quotient just kind of steps it up a notch. So yeah, I really like it. And I knew there would be an interesting story. You're an interesting guy. So I think you like telling stories, and you're a really engaging founder. So this is going to be a great conversation we're going to have. So, I'm going to come back to superpowers. So just a warning, okay? Because you talked about being a hero. So here's a weird question, right? Just to kind of warm us up. What's the last great meal you had? Like when you talk about amazing meals in recent memory.
Well, there was a meal that my wife, she took me to for my birthday last year. So we're talking right before the pandemic and right before we all got shut down. I actually can't even recall right now as we sit here the name of the restaurant because it's probably shut down. It's on Portland Street in Toronto. Yeah. But it was a place where you go to, super low light. You had to put your phones in a little lockbox in the table.
Oh, cool.
And the whole concept is we're going to keep you engaged with your company instead of engaged with technology. And I had a beautiful flank steak. We had some really, really nice kind of appetizers, and they had this really great drink that I capped the night off with. It had a little like liqueur that was a mint flavor liqueur.
Nice.
And they had a little chocolate with it. So when you drank it, it tasted like a chocolate Oreo that was mint flavored. It was divine.
Really? Really
Yeah.
cool. Yeah. So are you the kind of guy that likes to like experiment in the kitchen, or are you more of like a takeout delivery, or go out and dine somewhere, dining out? What's your choice if you have to choose the three?
I love to cook. I love to
Yeah.
create, and I love to go with no recipe. It's kind of
Nice.
my favorite thing to do. It's just a time thing, and I find it so relaxing.
There's a lot of artistic parallels there, right? Being a founder of a company, creating in the kitchen, other artistic outlets. So there's definitely a creative side to you, which I really want to unpack here today. So you talked a little bit about the name, where it came from, the logo, the colors. Give me a little bit more about your origin story. I want to hear about like how you got your superpowers. What inspired you to go out and do something crazy like start a company? Like, why would you do that? Give us a little bit about that. What was going on in the back of your mind that motivated you to start an InsurTech company?
Yeah, good question. Well, as I mentioned, I started my career really helping families frontline, right? Feet on the ground, working with people through bankruptcies, working through people with divorces, and you kind of realize how critical this partnership between a family and a financial professional truly is. And I really think it's a sacred bond. And the experiences I've had, I'll never forget the day that I got a call from one of my clients who was on the final, days of her life, and she had requested that the family call me so that I could be bedside with her the day before she passed to make sure that all of her wishes would be fulfilled. And as I tell you the story, like I'm getting goosebumps because there's a relationship there that goes well beyond servicing of financial. There's a life tie there with somebody. And it was a very special moment in my career, in my life, really. And I kind of got a great opportunity at corporate to go work in innovation. So TD Bank was, built their first innovation group and spent some time there doing big corporate projects. So kind of got to see the belly of the beast and how hard it is to change large organizations. And as kind of things happen, some clients of ours were looking for some solutions with employee benefits, and that was my foray into the startup world, where I joined a company as first employee, building a solution for the TPA market, or third-party administration market. And we ended up getting acquired. And fast forward to 2015, and I started to see the rise of the robo advisor. And
Mm,
you really started to see it on the wealth side of the industry, and a lot of really smart technologists saying, "Hey, you don't need people. We can just do all this through automation."
mm,
And I don't disagree. I think a lot of the work can be automated. The question is should it be, and where should it be, and how should it be? And
yeah.
so Fineo came to existence because I felt, as we looked at all the different verticals of financial services, life and health insurance is one of the most complicated products out there for general consumers. And I feel like whether you're buying a 500,000 term insurance or you're buying a complex whole life policy, it
Yeah.
should fit as part of a puzzle. And insurance is like a foundation of a planning process.
Right.
And I really wanted to open up that access, level the playing field between brokers who are independent and maybe some of the robos out there, and help to empower them with the technology to do their jobs better.
Yeah.
So that's really what our mission and goal is to bridge the digital divide between carriers, brokers, and clients.
Wow, that's incredible. So you've truly walked a mile in the end user's shoes. Like the folks that are using your platform, you've been there, you've done that. Having the story of actually being with the end consumer resonates with me. I come from the claims background, and it's something that really like brings that policy to life, right? You're selling an
Yeah.
intangible product, a piece of paper, and it's a promise, right? And when you're there for the delivery and the promise, it really brings new meaning to what you do. So that's a really inspiring story, Aly. You mentioned robo advisor, and it's a little unexpected, but I kind of want to go there a bit. You and I talked a bit about, you guys went down the path of bringing chatbots, and like, would I call you an early adopter um,
Totally.
in that realm? Like, how do you like take something so deeply personal, like what you just described, and bring a bot and a human? And is it one or the other, or is it both? And like, how do those two things go together in the whole equation?
Yeah. So maybe I'll take a step back and I'll kind of frame for you how that product evolved. And so, kind of as we were doing customer discovery back in early 2016, one of the insights after doing about 100 customer discovery interviews with brokers was, I leave my office more than I ever have, and most of my meetings these days are at Starbucks. And so that was kind of like the insight that led to the fact that they were missing something in their toolkit that they could take their office with them mobile. And so the product evolution was, well, I need a mobile first tool to help me organize and stay managed on the road. And so as we built that first product, there was a few different parts to it. One was this concept of how do I keep you focused between meetings? And our solution for that was we're going to give you an audio dictation tool so that after a meeting, you get a little nudge and it says, hey, I just met with John. Tell me about the meeting. And so brokers would like audio dictate their notes. We ran it through some fancy natural language processing algorithms and would recommend them next best action. So very quickly after that, brokers started to say, well, what I'd really love to do is to be able to get a quick quote on the fly. And this whole concept of quote on the fly, what did that mean? So what it meant is they wanted an assistant in their pocket that could help them get a quote on the fly. And so at the time, chatbot technology, John, was not what it is today.
No.
Today, you can go and drag and drop something and you can build a chatbot in 15 minutes. Back then, you had to hard code every single sentence, every single verb, every single line. So we were sitting there, I'm not kidding you, like 20-minute increments, watching what people were typing into this chatbot, manually answering it, and in the background, writing a new script for our quote bot. And so basically you could go in, you could say, I'm dealing with Aly. Aly is a male non-smoker, and then it would return to you a list of quotes. And so we did that early 2016. It was quite a journey back then.
And I'm sure you sent up a lot of prayers in the process that the thing just doesn't break in mid-conversation, right? Because you were really experimenting at that time. So
yeah, so you kind of had to balance between what can you again rely on early chatbot technology for, and then what could you do to hijack a conversation in real time if you needed to intervene. So again, it's kind of like taking the machine human model, and so we stuck together a bunch of tools to make that happen. Super like glue and duct tape stuff. But it was really fun to experiment.
That it's really cool how you talked about like almost having a pocket assistant, and then having those prompts on the admin side, because I think a lot of brokers would agree, like they're really strong at the sales side, the relationship side. The admin side is kind of like that necessary evil. I know in the businesses I was involved in, being out in the field was where the advisors got their high, right? It was going to the kitchen table, having the great conversation. But what happened in that discovery, and where did that information go? And is it informing the recommendations you're going to make later on in the sales process? So thanks for bringing that together. I was really curious to see how the bot technology kind of integrated into the whole workflow. And so it sounds to me like it's certainly not replacing the advisors. It's complementing what the advisors are already doing.
Right. And just, to be clear for people listening, like Finaeo is not a chatbot company. We were experimenting with some tooling back then. What we really are is we're an ecosystem for the insurance industry, where we help to bring together, insurance manufacturers with the supply side technology and help carriers kind of digitize products, customize them, and deploy them in our marketplace. And on the other side, we provide brokers with the tooling to take their client from prospect to policy and everything in between, in managing their customer relationship, managing compliance. And so it's just really interesting as an early stage company to kind of see your product evolve. I mean, we went from building a singular app to then building kind of a vertical CRM system, to then building a back office system, to then becoming a platform business. And now we're launching like an ecosystem model. And that's a journey as a technology company to go through. So it's been really, really fun. Super hard though.
That's amazing. And it's a perfect segue into like, okay, at its core, when you started, what was the original problem you were trying to solve? And, I really want to unpack this, because you can talk about the original problem and then how you've responded to the market and maybe how that problem you're solving has changed. Because I think you guys have pivoted quite a bit over the years since you started. But what was the original problem you were trying to solve?
Yeah, so I'd say that the vision of the company and the mission of the company hasn't changed. So from day one, we wanted to be an ecosystem, a marketplace where a broker or an advisor could come into one place and do their entire job without having to go to 12 different portals and a bunch of different websites. So that's the core problem we wanted to solve. What's pivoted and evolved is both the product in terms of how did we get to this end state, and then the business model, which is how do we then take it to market. So those are the things that have evolved. The vision has been, I think, very consistent. Actually, it's funny, it's our 5-year anniversary this month. And I was going through a trip down memory lane, looking at some articles from back in 2016, 2017. Even back then, we were talking about building a marketplace ecosystem. So I feel very strongly that, vision hasn't changed. What's been interesting is the pivots around product to get there, and the pivots around business model to make it come to life.
And what's really cool about it, like an ecosystem, is I know it's a metaphor, but it really is a living organism. So what goes in that ecosystem will change as the market needs change. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely. And I can give you some examples. Like on the one side, you've got a supply challenge, which is how do you help insurance companies who are legacy in nature or who may struggle to go digital quick? How do you help them really power distribution in a unique way? And then how do you help that broker customer journey happen? But inside and around all of that, there's a bunch of other mechanics. So for example, you've got a broker who is dealing with a financial planning process.
Yeah.
And in there are a bunch of specific tools that they're going to need that sit outside of their insurance journey. Well, how does Fineo become that operating system for a broker where you start your day in Fineo and you can launch into any part of your day from Fineo? And that's a really complicated workflow to build and to think about how does the user and the broker interact with not just Fineo, but their entire life around financial planning. Because we're not trying to be an expert in everything. We've got a lane, we want to win our lane, but we want to partner with great companies who are solving adjacent problems.
So you must have some great connectivity APIs in place, because advisors love their tools, right? And a lot of advisors like, you're not going to pry that tool out of my cold dead hands, even if you try, right? So, what's that been like as you're building this ecosystem? Have you been, what would you say your success rate, your hit rate's been around kind of integrating with some of those tools that are out there?
Yeah, so the first question is kind of like, how do you set up your platform to be a truly API enabled system from day one? And so the first part is building a really great data model and a great architecture to the system so that you can really segregate your front end experience or for what people look and see and feel from the back end data side, which is how do we move information. And so everything at Fineo from day one has been microservices based. And think about that like a Lego kit where you can plug in and out different systems or different tools so that you can really unify a workflow, but you're not constrained by having to do everything on your side. The challenge really, John, is at the insurer level, where the insurers just still don't have that connectivity. So a lot of the unique innovations we've had to develop is how do we solve that problem in light of the fact that the industry is not there yet, and there's still a little mile to go till everybody catches up. So that's been the hardest part.
Are you trying to tell me that insurers have manual forms and manual processes? Come on.
I mean, they might. I don't know. You might see a few left.
You know what though? That's the beauty about the InsurTech space is there's so much room for innovation, right? Because you've got this big industry that has been clipping down the road for over 200 years and has lots of legacy processes, but so much potential to innovate and to transform. So like, you're really changing the game here. It sounds like. A couple things that come to mind. I heard someone call you a digital MGA. Is that accurate? Would you call yourself an MGA?
I mean, it depends how you define an MGA, right? I think there's functions of what we do that are wholesale in nature, right? Like we're a marketplace. And if you think about the foundation of an MGA or an IMO in the States, I mean, they are an aggregator and they provide access to brokers for products. So if that's the definition, then we fit the definition. However, we don't see ourselves as an MGA. We really see ourselves as an enabler to the entire ecosystem. Yeah. And one part of that ecosystem is the wholesaling layer. And we partner with that layer to help distribute both on the supply side and the demand side. Right. So we really don't see ourselves as only a MGA. We really look at ourselves as an ecosystem platform. And one of the functions we have is distribution. And in that, we play the role of distributor. And I think today that's called an IMO or an MGA, depending who you ask.
Okay, so part of the reason I asked, like, if we never know who our audience is going to be, if there's an MGA out there listening to this, is Finaeo a solution for me, or do I need to just be a broker or advisor, either working for a direct writer or working for a traditional broker? So are they part of your target audience?
They are. I mean, ultimately, we've got a really close relationship with Hub Financial here in Canada. And so that's been our primary partner on the MGA side. But of course, our goal is to enable the industry at scale. And so both sides of the border, we're looking for partnerships to really scale that business out. But again, we've got a really close, tight relationship with our friends at Hub Financial.
Nice. And I'm glad you mentioned the Canadian piece. So as I've got flags waving here behind me, part of your origin story is you're Canadian InsurTech. Are all of your operations, have you been able to, because I want to talk a little bit about the stage of the company, like sure. Are all your operations still in Canada? Where did you start and what did that look like? And why did you make the moves that you made?
Yeah, so we're operating both sides of the border. We're launching in the States officially later this coming Q2. So we're really excited about that. We've got a small, but I think powerful US hires out there. So we've got a couple of team members. We've got a small office in California.
Nice.
So, Finaeo's a North American business now, and our ambitions are global. But one of the things that I hold very dear to me is that I'm a Canadian. I'm a patriot. I'm born and raised in this country. And I'm not really interested in the like Silicon Valley model of you can't build a world-class company unless you're in Silicon Valley. Like, no, that's not true. And I think that we as a country have a really great opportunity to showcase on a global stage that we can build innovative companies from our side of the border. We don't have to all move down to the States to do it.
Right.
We finally have some funding here in this country where we can power early stage businesses. But the reality is that the big checks, they come from US investors. And US investors are still not comfortable, frankly, in investing in Canadian only businesses. They really like to see that you've been able to get out and get to their side of the country, because that's where the scale is for the most part. But definitely we are committed to growing and building our company from Canada as in headquarters.
Well, and this is part of the reason why I started InsurTech Canada as a platform, as a community to shine a light on all the innovation that's coming out of Canada. And hearing, it's not enough for me to say it, and that's why I want to talk to as many founders as possible, for you to share your successes and your challenges and failures that you've experienced as a Canadian founder. And let's be real, right? We're neighbors to the largest economy in the world, and we can't pretend like that's not there. It's a blessing and it can be a curse at times. So in your journey and talking about like where you are, when you were raising capital, when you were trying to get funding, is it possible for a Canadian company, and maybe you can talk from your own experience, to get funding in Canada and to stay true to their Canadian roots? And is there a right time or a wrong time to switch gears and go south of the border? I know that's a complicated question, but answer it however you feel comfortable.
Sure. Well, I think in hindsight, I think one of the things that we don't push each other enough on in the ecosystem is questioning, why are we starting our businesses in Canada? So just because you are in Canada from a headquarter perspective, does that necessarily mean your first market has to be Canada?
Yeah.
And I think a lot of entrepreneurs say, well, Canada will be my test bed and I'll validate and then I'll go to the States. Well, just go to the States. If that's what you want to do, then just go do that, right? Like, we had a very specific reason to start our business here. It's regulated. We know the players of the game really well. We had a little bit of brand recognition between my co-founder and I. So we really could jumpstart our business from Canada. But that's not the case for every company and doesn't have to be the case for every company. I think the other thing to really question is, if you are taking venture capital as a founder, you're committing yourself to a track and you're committing yourself to a specific set of outcomes that are completely different than if you're an angel funded or you bootstrapped your company. And that pressure and that growth, can you really see that growth if you stay in Canada? And the inflection point of when you go to the States, it's not just like, oh, I just flip a switch and now I'm in the US. Like, to give you an example, for Finaeo, we started preparing for our US expansion 18 months in advance because we had to get state licensed in 50 states. And that is a non-trivial amount of work. And you have to go build partnerships and you have to start a whole nother company, really.
Yeah.
And so I think it's really about laying the roadmap as to, well, why am I picking Canada as my first market? There has to be a real reason to do that. Then the second is, what is the inflection point by which I'm willing to make that switch down to the States? And what can I do to start preparing my company today to meet that business need? And it doesn't mean you have to have everything sorted out. But I had a conversation with a VC the other week, and he was telling me about a Canadian entrepreneur, no names, but he was super disappointed that when he asked the question of, when are you going to go to the States and what do you need to get there? The answer was, yeah, we kind of think this. No, it's like, what do you need to get there? And when are you going to go? And have a point of view on that from the start.
Yeah, you really have to make your intentions known. And I think maybe, and a lot of startup founders go into this not knowing, they think they're going to get that direction from their investor or from the person writing the check. And I think the opposite is probably true. They want to see, do you have a concrete plan in place? And in some cases, it might even be a test of your commitment. Are you going to go anyway? Like, whether you get this check or not? What would you say to people? Because a lot of founders bootstrap in the beginning. and it's family money, or it's whatever they've got saved up, maybe some loans that they're guaranteeing. But there comes a time in every founder's journey when they have to scale, and the only way to scale is to bring in outside funding. What was that like for you? And would you recommend that to somebody who's contemplating, do I really want to give up a piece of my company, or do I really want to bring in outside capital? Because now I'm almost beholden to someone else's goals and objectives for my vision for my company. Did you feel like that was a challenge for you? And what advice would you give to someone out there who's kind of contemplating that right now?
Yeah, sure. I think a couple of things, like get really familiar with what venture capital is from an asset class. Like it is an asset class, right? And I think one of the things I didn't really appreciate going through the process in the early days was, what are the outcomes that venture capitalists truly need to get to for you to be investable? So what is your market opportunity? What's your return profile for them as a fund? How do you fit in the construct of a portfolio strategy in venture? Right. Yep. And a couple of really great reads for first-time founders, like Venture Deals by Brad Feld is an amazing book. There's another one called The Secrets of Sand Hill Road. It's another really great, like, foundational book on what does it mean to be in venture capital. I think the other question to ask yourself is, raising venture capital is not the objective. The objective is to build a really great, long-standing, hyper-scaling company.
Yeah.
And venture capital is a tool to help you achieve that outcome. So I think be really clear about, if you're taking this money, again, you're going on a track, and that track has a very specific requirement from shareholders in terms of outcomes. And it's world-class. It's the 1% of the 1% that you're trying to go after. And that's not to diminish anybody who's building a really great small business that's bootstrapped, or anybody who's building a $50, $100 million business without taking venture capital. Like, that's nothing to sneeze at, and there is nothing wrong with that. And I think the fear that I have, John, is that too many founders look at TechCrunch and BetaKit and get super rosy-eyed about this company raised 100 million. Like, that's not really the celebration moment. That's PR stuff.
Yeah.
Right. All this money is adding more pressure, more complexity, and more struggle to your business. It doesn't make it easier, but it's a tool to help you take a company to another place. And I'll tell you, there is no push, no better push than venture capital in terms of trying to get you to insane outcomes.
Right.
Because that's really what they're trying to achieve for you.
Yeah. Yeah. But it is a tool. And I think it's important to know, where it kind of sits within the priority of things. It can't be more important than the original objective you set out to solve for, or the original problem you tried to solve for. And as far as like the stage of your company is concerned, you guys have raised funds. So, what's that been like for you? And, what stage are you at? Is Finaeo going to be a publicly traded company someday? What are your ambitions and aspirations there?
Yeah, I mean, I'll defer to what the outcome becomes in terms of, like, the market will probably deem somewhere in terms of how we end up going. But I'll say my commitment is to the vision of the company and the vision of the industry that we want to create, right? Which is, and that really means empowering both carriers, distributors, and clients with, from my perspective, a unified experience. And so if we just stay hyper focused on solving that problem, the outcomes will emerge, because I think we're building really valuable IP. I think we're building a very valuable company from an enterprise perspective. However, I'm not really focusing on, is this an IPO company? We've got a point of view. Like, they're publicly traded companies that do what we do in some way, shape, or form. There's also companies that have been acquired that do what we do. But the real question is, if we bring the industry the type of value that we believe we can, and that we already are, then we think it's a valuable asset that somebody's going to want to purchase at some point. Yeah,
good answer. And do you think it's important that your investors understand the insurance space? Or
yes and no.
Irrelevant?
Yes and no. I think you need both. So if you need domain expertise, like, I don't think you can go and solve this problem unless you understand this problem. And as a byproduct of solving this problem, you have to have a board that can support strategic discussions. And if they don't come from the industry, it's both a beauty and a beast. Yeah. It's a beauty because they're going to ask you what might be ridiculous questions, but they'll push your thinking on, why did this actually exist? Why is it done this way? Can you really unpack the, like, first principle of the problem?
Right.
But then having, investors around the table or board members around the table that really understand the nuances and the dynamics of the industry, you can't replace that. Like, our board is a good example. We've got a 2-time insurance company CEO named Alistair Campbell as a board member. Alistair Campbell really understands the dynamics of the industry, and he can always help balance the table around expectations of growth scale, what it's going to take to get from point A to point B from an industry perspective. And then on the other side, we've got two amazing board members, one from Luge Capital named Kareem Galani, and one from Impression Ventures, our first institutional investor named Christian Lassonde.
Yeah.
Neither one of them come from the insurance space, but my oh my, are these really bright people in the fintech space. So you put all that together, and you've got yourself a good, well-rounded kind of perspective on how to attack a problem.
Yeah, you said something about first principles there. That's really important to understand. And part of the reason I went down that path, I went there for a reason, because what I'm seeing from my observation is you are seeing a lot of outsiders come in to the industry, people who don't have backgrounds in insurance, and they're coming up with great ideas and new tools that the industry needs, quite frankly. But this can be a complicated industry to navigate. So, you've got founders like yourself who come from the industry and have that domain expertise. So, you could probably go with, investors that know a little bit less about the actual industry nuances and kind of cover off both sides, right? And get that outside perspective. But for those that are outsiders completely coming into the industry, don't know how to navigate, is there any advice that you would give them? Because I think we as an industry, we need to encourage outsiders to come in. There's going to be innovation from within, but I think a lot of the innovation is going to come from the outside. And I think the industry needs to embrace that.
I hear you, John. And I believe you, and I support that. I think that, what we really need is fresh ideas and people who are not afraid to go and try things. So my recommendation to those, early founders who aren't from our industry is, first and foremost, like, understand the industry you're trying to enter, like truly have an appreciation for what you're trying to achieve. And I'm a big proponent of, if you understand the history, you can start to predict a little bit of the future.
Yeah.
And so become a student, become a scholar of our industry, and it will take you a long way in terms of how you unpack ideas. The other is, you really got to start to surround yourself with some dedicated advisors who can help validate for you. But the other part is that nothing replaces a co-founder who comes from the space. So if you're coming to the space as a technical founder, then please pair yourself with someone from the industry, because I believe that they can be a great day-to-day asset for you. It's one thing to have an advisor who can be on standby, but it's another thing to be in the trenches day-to-day with somebody in the weeds who can help you think through and talk through the problem. So those are the three things that you can do: become a scholar, educate yourself on the history that can help you predict the future. Second is, put a bunch of people around you who are super smart and into the space. And then, try your hardest to find a co-founding relationship where you can bridge that gap day to day.
Sound advice. And now that you mention it, you have a co-founder as well. And, would you say you're carbon copies of each other, or
absolutely not?
Is there a healthy friction there?
Healthy friction. And we, one of the things that I appreciate, Donald Chu is my co-founder, is that we come from different places.
Yeah.
And we've grown up in different ways. And, the thing that holds us together, though, is our mission and vision and our core values.
Right.
And the thing that I will say with a lot of like love in my heart is that I fight with Donald like a brother, and I love him like family, but we don't agree on everything. And we push each other really hard on ideas. And the thing that's really beautiful about our partnership is, we might have a little spat at 9:30 a.m. and by 10:30 a.m. it's finished, and we're back at the same page, working on the same problem, like right after it. And there's no like emotional attachment to our ideas. We just challenge each other really hard. But the net result is, we both know why we wake up in the morning and why we put in the time we do. Is because we believe in the problem and we believe in each other, and we're going to make it hell or high water. I wouldn't pick another person to go build this company with.
That's awesome. And, I think it's important to challenge each other and to have those disagreements. And, I always say, if you're at a boardroom table and all you're surrounded by is people nodding their heads yes all the time, that's a danger sign right there, right?
You're in trouble.
So you got to have those moments and then be able to get past them. And it's ultimately what's best for the company, what moves the organization forward. So what would you say in your journey has been your biggest challenge? And like, what are some of the warning signs you would give to people who are looking to do something as insane as start a company from scratch and go into the InsurTech space?
Yeah, I think this one's less like InsurTech and more just entrepreneur life.
Yeah.
I don't think I've done a great job until recently. And it wasn't until I got a CEO coach that really helped me understand how much I was affecting my mental and physical health and the
Wow.
way I was working and the way that it was affecting my own psyche and my own ability to be present with my kid and my wife, and how much I needed to invest in myself
Hmm.
before I could really be the greatest, CEO that I can be, the greatest person that I can be. I don't think that that's been very clear to most of us in the ecosystem, right? Like, I don't want to paint any roses and butterflies. Like, it's 80 to 100-hour weeks every single week,
Yeah.
like clockwork, right? And so that takes a toll and a strain. And yeah, there's other ways to build companies, but when you're a 6-person team, John,
Yeah.
what are you supposed to do? You got to raise money, you got to be sales, you got to be success, you got to be engineering. Like, you got to do it all in the beginning,
And it's
and
lonely.
that takes a toll.
And
Yeah.
it's lonely, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So
So I
see,
wish I would have talked to somebody earlier about that. Like, he's my CEO coach, but he's almost like my therapist, man. Like,
yeah, yeah.
that's my biggest learning.
I think like if anyone takes anything away from this, if there's a startup founder or founders listening to this podcast, it's that piece of advice you just gave, because I think there is a false pride that exists right now where people say I'm a founder of a company and I launched my own startup and look how many hours I'm working and look how burnt out I am and look at the bags under my eyes and I'm happy for the freedom and everything else, but it's almost like you need to kind of be in this turmoil or struggle to be successful. And it sounds like through the inspiration of this coach that he or she has shown you a better way or shone a light on some of the things maybe you weren't aware of, because physical and mental and spiritual health are so important. And I can relate personally. There are times where I know I should be in front of the screen and I should be doing something, but instead behind this green screen there's a bike and I jump on the bike instead. And it's those moments where I spend time with my children and I come back with more mental clarity than I had before. And running up against the wall solving a problem, sometimes you just got to change your environment, change your space, or change your routine, and you'll actually have more clarity when you come back to the table. So those are just like little tiny examples, but what you just said, and I think it'll be different for every person. That's important to be aware of and be conscious of on your founder's journey. There's going to be turmoil. You're going to be stretched. And even if you kind of let it go a little bit, be like, always kind of have that, am I taking care of the things that are important in my life? Am I taking care of my physical well-being, my spiritual well-being, my mental well-being, and my relationships? So great point, Aly. I'm glad you mentioned that. And it's funny because, I had a conversation with a client recently who talked about, we're superstars. We don't need a coach. And even the greatest superstars, you look at the Michael Jordan story, which is on Netflix, and that's not a plug for Netflix, but, and I'm not even a basketball guy. And I watched that story and you look at the role that having a new coach played in his career and in his dynamic, and he was already at the top of his game, right? So that
absolutely
is so important. So would you say, this is a bit of a twist, but is it possible for Canadian founders to be successful and to raise money in Canada and stay in Canada? You kind of touched on it earlier, but is the market big enough? You hear so many people being pushed south and,
sure.
Not to pick on our American neighbors, but for some people that's just not in the cards. They have too many roots here.
Yeah.
And, we have over 30 million people in Canada. We're a G7 country. We're the 10th largest economy in the world from a GDP perspective. Is it possible to just really double down on Canada and stay in Canada?
Of course it is. Of course it is. I mean, I'll give you a small example, right? Think about HRIS software for small businesses. Well, there is going to be small businesses built for the rest of time.
Yeah.
And they're going to be Canadian companies, and they're going to probably want to work with Canadian companies on data and managing their HR stuff, right? And so, I think there's a couple of companies, like Humie is a great example. Humie's a Canadian company, raised money from the States, is not leaving Canada, at least as far as I know, right? So I think that there's great companies to be built on our side of the border. If you're taking venture capital per se, then I think the question to ask is there a market size large enough that I can get the outcome that I would need only if I stayed in Canada. So maybe it's less about like what business are you in, but what is the market size and market potential. So a great thing I love to talk to early founders about is, are you solving a problem that is taking market share, or are you creating market share? Like, can you create a large enough market in Canada, not just absorb what's in Canada? And if that's the case, then like, God bless you, go take it down.
Yeah.
But I don't think that we should all fall into the trap that you can only build a big business outside of Canada. I think there's big businesses to be built in every country.
Yeah. So you talked a little bit, I think it's on a side chat that you're involved in. You talked about letting go as a CEO and letting go as a founder. On this topic of straddling the border, because the majority of us Canadians live within 200 kilometers of the US border. When you do, if you do make that courageous decision to go south, which a lot of companies do, and it's the right decision for a lot of companies. Now, where do you focus, Aly? Like, how can you grow that market while being here? And is there a way to structure the company to be successful and do that? And is part of that letting go, or are you still kind of going through that journey right now?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think that this is the beautiful thing about startups, is that you can pivot your operating model like on a dime if something's not working, right? So to give you an example, we have a couple of staff members in the US, and we have a headquartered model out of Toronto. And our thinking is that we can run the business in any country from Toronto. Well, in a year from now, I don't know if that'll be true. And we might have to have headquarters in multiple cities across the world to really execute on that plan operationally. Time zones, culture differences, talent pools that are different. You got to think about all those things, right? We were thinking about, I'll give you one small example. We were looking at branding on our portal or on our platform, Canadian versus US. Well, we put up a flag, right? That's, how do you denote geo better than a flag? And one of our staff members who has family and friends in the States said, Aly, one of the things you should never do is cut off the image of a flag. In the US, they're real serious about that. It should be a square flag, not a circle cut out of their flag. And I was like, what? Cultural nuances matter. You can't really know that unless you're embedded in a country, right? So I think part of it is the flexibility, but letting go as a CEO is paramount if you're ever going to focus on the most important things, because at some point you can't be doing every job. You got to fire yourself from the jobs. And then the other thing is like, what is your core function as CEO? I mean, it's set vision, set strategy, make sure core values are aligned, and then make sure the company's fueled with the right capital to really hit its objectives. And so I think that the quicker you can start to let go some of the day-to-day operations, the better job you can spend on the highest value activities where a CEO should spend their time.
Cool. I feel like we could talk for like another hour. There's so many side questions and rabbit holes I want to go down with you. But for now, I'm going to ask you, what do you want Finaeo to be known for? You guys, it started as a company by advisors, for advisors, Canadian. Now you've crossed that line into the US. You've got multiple carriers behind you. You're expanding. Global domination is in your future. What do you want to be? But what do you want people to say about you? What do you want your customers, your end users to say about you when they talk about Finaeo?
Yeah. Well, I've never actually been asked that question.
No.
But I think that the answer for me is very simple. I want to be known as a human first company. Like, we're a tech company, don't get me wrong. Okay, but this is a human first problem, and it's a human first industry, and I don't want to lose that. If that happens, John, I'm retiring from financial services. So that's my first and foremost. I hope when people think about Finaeo, they say, yeah, that was the company that protected brokers, protected advisors, and protected people. It's the first. The second is I want to be known as an inspirational company that didn't have to be a disruptor to create innovation and change. Like, we're a catalyst, right? We're a company that's trying to enable an industry, not trying to cut people out. Right. I think that's a very important stance that we've taken. We don't sell direct, we power brokers. We don't manufacture our own product. We work with carriers to digitize theirs. Like, we took very deliberate stances on what we are and what we are not. Yeah. And the third thing is that I hope we can really pave the way and inspire Canadian companies to go and explore how they can be world-changing companies. And like, we've had such great opportunities. Like, Finaeo was the first Canadian company to be part of OnRamp InsurTech conference last year, or InsurTech Accelerator. We've been on the stage of InsurTech New York this week. We've been a finalist selection for Mass Challenge, which is, we're the only Canadian company to get these opportunities. Why? Because we put ourselves out there, and we're not afraid to say we're Canadian and we're proud to be.
Yeah.
So I hope we can inspire others to go take this on.
That's really cool. And as Canadians, I think we shy away from thinking big sometimes. And those are really inspiring words to hear from you. And the human first piece, tech is really an enabler for humans, right? Doesn't have to replace humans. And, being an inspirational disruptor, I don't know if we just coined that phrase today, but, I see that as someone doesn't have to lose for you to win. You can be
100%.
winning and other people winning along with you, right? And so those are some really cool things to be known for, Aly. Last thing, if we want to know more about Finaeo, if we want to find you or engage with you, how would we find you online?
Yeah, a couple places. So you can check us out, of course, at our website, www.finaeo.com, Finaeo. You can always find me on LinkedIn, Aly Dhalla, search me up, DM me. And of course, now for those with iOS, you can find me on Clubhouse.
Cool. Nice. Yeah. And I just joined Clubhouse myself. So thanks for bringing me on board. Last question, unexpected. I said I'd come back to the superhero thing. What's your superpower? I won't ask you what your kryptonite is, but I want to know what your superpower is.
Well, if I was to pick one superhero, it'd be Iron Man.
Nice.
Just because, he's got a suit. He's a car guy. I'm a car guy, and he's a techie. I'm a techie. I think we'd get along just fine. But in terms of a superpower, I really hope that my superpower is inspiring others to do what is seemingly the impossible. Yeah. And that I can inspire a group of people or an industry in this case to really take a leap and say, no, we can do it. It sounds crazy. It's really hard, but we can get it done. And I believe that's my superpower.
Good for you. That's awesome. So, just a few things here to wrap up. You started out as an advisor, building a tool for advisors to be an enabler for the industry. You've kept your feet on the ground throughout all of this. Good Canadian company. You've been able to raise funds in Canada, successfully straddle the Canada-US border while running operations out of Toronto. You've focused on being an API-enabled organization. And, some advice that you've given to startup CEOs or founders is surround yourself with smart people, have a strong board. Don't forget about, the important things like your health, your family, your well-being, and wanting to be known as a human first company. Those are pretty good things to be known for. So thanks for sitting down with me today, Aly. I look forward to the follow-up interview and getting deeper into some other topics. So really appreciate it.
Thanks a lot, John, and thanks for what you're doing for the economy and for the country here. I think we need more people like you doing what you're doing.
Awesome. Thank you. Thanks for making it possible. Really appreciate it.